Case 6. The use of motorcycle helmets. Alvin has chosen to live a carefree life full of risks and thrills. He declines to assume the duty of safeguarding himself and to wear a protective helmet during his motorcycle expeditions. All participants are competent adults, fully informed, capable of acting rationally, and free from undue pressure.
The discussion of whether an individual should submit to an apparently trivial restriction, such as a motorcycle helmet or seatbelt, to reduce the high risk of serious injury, gives rise to a conflict of prima facie duties to oneself. In this scenario, the motorcycle driver must determine whether to prioritize his prima facie duty of self-preservation against countervailing motives. These might include the discomfort of wearing a helmet, the desire to take risks, or the judgment that specific traffic conditions make the risk of injury unlikely. Should he choose not to wear a helmet, an objective observer will likely find a marked disproportion of interests. Feinberg rejects the assessment of a trivial restriction and argues that personal sovereignty cannot be subject to a cost-benefit calculation.
Feinberg is not willing to compromise on personal freedom. He may be open to considering the admissibility of justification in cases involving indirect effects. Harcourt has warned that the debate on acts directed at oneself has shifted from the protection of the individual against himself to a focus on the indirect harms of conduct. The discussion now concerns whether and to what extent the indirect effects of self-directed conduct on third parties or society can justify the restriction of freedom. This trend is also evident in German case law. The German Federal Constitutional Court has dismissed the challenge to the constitutionality of the motorcycle helmet mandate, ruling that it does not violate personal liberty. The court's reasoning centered on the broader societal interests and the protection of third parties, rather than on the individual's right to personal choice. It should be noted that there is no mention of protection for oneself. Rather, the focus is on the indirect effects on others in decisions regarding the obligation to wear seatbelts, the criminal prohibition of homosexuality, the consumption of cannabis, and incest between siblings.
After rejecting other potential rationales, Feinberg does not dismiss the possibility that the obligation to wear a protective helmet stems from a balance between the interest in not wearing a helmet and the psychological distress of those involved in the accident, such as medical workers, traumatized witnesses, and, above all, the other driver. German case law refers to the duty to protect individuals who have been involved in a traffic accident. Wearing a protective helmet would enable motorcyclists to better contribute to preventing risks to the life and physical integrity of other people after an accident. This would enable them to administer first aid or contact emergency medical services. They may also help prevent further damage by taking measures to secure the accident site, for example, by setting up warning triangles or drawing attention to the accident site and clearing obstacles from the road. In such cases, the relationship is no longer a non-conflicting relationship. Instead, the prima facie duties to oneself are now opposed to the prima facie social duties of protection and non-interference towards others.
While this is often considered a case of protection against oneself, traffic regulations are actually intended to govern behavior that occurs in social public spaces. The social public sphere is defined by the equal and voluntary participation of individuals in an activity which is open to all and subject to public scrutiny. This environment is characterized by objective and impartial relationships. Nevertheless, they lack public relevance. Driving a motor vehicle on public roads is a behavior that occurs within a social sphere. The primary objective of traffic regulation is to safeguard individuals and property in environments where accidents are likely to occur. In this case, the spheres of harm to oneself and to others are intertwined. In this social sphere, even mediate and relatively unlikely effects, compared to other direct and frequent harms in vehicle traffic, may justify a limitation of the individual's freedom of self-determination.
The driver who would have preferred to avoid wearing a helmet faces a prima facie conflict of duties. Alvin's prima facie duty to himself to autonomously choose to drive without discomfort is opposed by the immediate prima facie social right of everyone to avoid increasing risk on public roads and their prima facie social duty of protection and non-interference. it is unclear how we should value individual freedom.
According to the Hobbesian concept of freedom, the decision not to wear a helmet may appear trivial. If we also take into account the freedom to choose autonomously, then Alvin's position deserves further consideration. Feinberg has proposed distinguishing the motorcyclist's interest in not wearing a helmet, depending on whether it is based on mere convenience or comfort, a sense of freedom, romantic symbolism, or an adventurous lifestyle. However, he also acknowledges the challenge of determining the significance of a particular behavior for an individual's life through rational calculation. For example, consider the case of the mountaineer who wonders how important it is for him to climb Mount Everest.
In our view, these parameters can be valuable in resolving an internal conflict of duties to oneself. However, in the context of behaviors that impact others within a social sphere, the assessment must incorporate the principle of reciprocity. In this case, we must consider whether not wearing a protective helmet on public roads is in accordance with everyone's freedom, according to a universal law. The answer is no. It is reasonable to expect that all parties will take every possible measure to minimize the risk of accidents on public roads.
Given that social duties tend to prevail in the social sphere to the same extent that the importance of autonomously choosing a free of interference course of action diminishes, it could be argued that the social duties of protection and non-interference of the motorcyclist are in this case more important than his duties to himself, and that the obligation established by law is not a violation of his right to freedom. However, the issue of justice in specific cases remains where an individual's assessment is often more precise than a legislator's prognosis. For instance, in a scenario where the factual conditions would have precluded any possibility of social interaction, such as on a road that is inaccessible to other drivers.
In conclusion, the indirect effect on social interests cannot justify the prohibition of conduct that constitutes an individual's core privacy. However, when it comes to conduct that falls within the social sphere, the indirect effects of that conduct may justify intervention by society. Thus, the balancing method may be modified by the assessment criteria specific to each sphere.